Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general. Let's get on with the show.
Tales from the Loop is the sci-fi show on Amazon Prime. Episode 5, Control, takes us back to the lives of the Thompson family, where Danny's parents, Ed and Kate, are still struggling, not only with Danny being in a coma, but also with the huge medical bills that are mounting associated with that care. And while Kate is getting a bit cold and snippy, Ed's feeling increasingly like he's got no control over his life, hence the episode title. And that's especially when the electricity meter in the basement starts shorting out, and they can't afford to fix it. And Ed's a little bit too proud to ask for a loan off his brother-in-law, but eventually he plucks up the courage to ask for an advance from work. And they're also having issues with some kids bullying wee deaf Beth, and a strange figure hanging around the house at night, and finding things like the doors open. And none of this has helped when Ed's workmate Lucas, who we might remember from a few weeks ago, mentioning that his house got broken into actually while he was still at home. And that gets Ed all paranoid, so he takes the money and spends it on a scrapper robot and uses it to patrol the street like a night watchman. And that kind of puts the neighbours' backs up a bit, and the cops end up having a wee word with him about it because they've had some complaints. But seeing as he hasn't broken the law, they leave it be, especially since Beth looks a wee bit mean when she's playing with it. And then one night he nods off while he's controlling it, and Jacob, who we know is really Danny, who has also been the shadowy figure, brings back a toy that the bullies had stolen. And the little girl goes out to the garage to get it, and of course, the noise wakes Ed up and he hears it and trashes the garage door, nearly hurting her. And after that, Kate takes Beth and goes to her brother's place, and Ed finally breaks down while visiting Danny and realises he can't control everything, and he can't fix everything. So he sells the scrapper and sorts out the shonky power box in the basement. And finally, Kate and Beth come home, and it looks like things might just be on the mend. So what do I think? Well, I think this week we kind of have to commend the work of the actors in this. I mean, I don't really know them from much else, but apparently Dan Bacadal and Lauren Weedman, who played Ed and Kate, are really well-established US TV actors, and they've been in a bunch of shows. And Tales from the Loop has always managed to really showcase some really fantastic acting, very naturalistic stuff that conveys a huge amount of character and humanity without saying an awful lot. And I love that we got more of Ed's character, and an extension of what we saw of him in the previous episode, as this kindly, loving dad. But now we see he's also the kind of guy who really takes the world on his shoulders, and doesn't necessarily deal with everything brilliantly, but he clearly sees himself as that classic dad, who's meant to keep the family safe and support them, and the tragic coma that Danny's in is kind of shaking him almost to the point of a breakdown. I also like that when he does emotionally break, he admits to all this.
I fix things. That's what I do. I've done it my whole life. But I can't fix this.
And actually saying it out loud seems to make him understand that he needs to change. And there was a lot of really great character moments around that in the main plot. Things like Lucas, dealing with Ed's emotional fragility, and the two cops, and some cracking work by the wee girl playing Beth. I mean, she was just fantastic. I mean, generally just all round, this was really well done. And I like that the events of the previous episodes in the show are kind of tying into these situations. It's kind of a cascade of things, like the Danny Jacob situation. But also that the time stopping that May and Ethan did is affecting people as well. It didn't go unnoticed. People noticed that they'd gone in and taken things out of their houses. And I'm really glad that the episode didn't go full dark and horrible, because honestly, when it got to this bit, I genuinely thought they were going to kill off the wee girl. But I think the kind of redemption ending is a lot nicer. And as usual, I mean, Philip Glass's music is fantastic, the cinematography was brilliant. But surprisingly, this week I actually thought that the special effects were a wee bit ropier than usual. Although, I mean, to be fair, this week probably had more obvious CGI than any of the previous ones. Certainly more model work and right up in your face stuff with all the robots things. I mean, sure, the show has done a lot of stuff previously, like huge amounts of background basic stuff like buildings and things, the floaty snow, the eclipse, and the work to freeze everybody in the time stop episode. But there were just a few moments of this where the scrapper robot looked kind of cartoony. I mean, it just looked not anywhere near as good as the other robot, the one that Jacob went into. And though I did praise the acting work, I have to say there's a little bit of a laziness to the typical American family storyline being shown here. I mean, it kind of puts me in mind of The Simpsons of all things, the overweight, hapless dad, the shrewish mum, and the smart kid, and, that 2.4 children kind of thing that you see in everything from, as I said, The Simpsons to Family Guy to every other sitcom ever made. And all of it just felt a little bit tired. And particularly the way that show never actually gets inside Kate's head. I mean, that's kind of the Breaking Bad problem, where people ended up disliking Skylar because she seems like a bit of a killjoy, and rather than her actually being the sane and sensible one, dealing with her husband descending into criminal activity, and the show really interestingly showing how that would affect somebody. But, I mean, it wasn't terrible, and stereotypes and cliches do exist because people fall into them quite often, so it is still forgivable. And yeah, sure, it was predictable up to a point, but I think I've kind of gotten my head right for what this show is and what it's trying to do. So I can't wait to see what happens in the last 3 episodes. And before I go, I just want to mention that I'm taking a wee holiday away from editing and reviewing stuff throughout August. So unfortunately the next episode of Tales from the Loop review won't actually be until September. But there'll be a bit more about that in another video that I'm doing. So until September, I've been Ian, and these have been my grumpy opinions. And a special thanks to everybody listening, and especially my patrons, and most especially to Michelle Forbes and Judith Coloma, my top tier patrons. Thank you everybody. Everybody stay safe. Cheerio.